Welcome to MojoPlays, and we're tapping into our Spidey strength to overcome these bosses in Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Full spoilers ahead, so swing with caution.
But I believe anything can be broken.
Sandman.
I need your help. Mr. Morales, is it? Are you sure this isn't something you can handle yourself? I'm sure.
Is not only the introduction to Spider-Man 2, but the game's first encounter/boss fight, Sandman also acts as the game's tutorial. Much of the villain's challenge comes from players getting reacquainted with the game's mechanics and controls while attempting to battle the skyscraper-sized sandstorm. Full of smaller combat encounters with Sandmen, as well as numerous quick-time events, it can be easy for newcomers and even some veterans to become overwhelmed as the battle rages on. In terms of a boss battle, it's not particularly challenging, but it does start the game off with a bang. Aside from setting up the rest of the narrative going forward, it gave Insomniac a chance to really flex their muscles on a scale unlike anything the series had done so far. Mysterio.
Beck. The name is... The name is... Mysterio.
Although nothing more than a mention in 2018 Spider-Man, players finally got the chance to take on the Master Illusionist in Spider-Man 2. Of course, arguably, all of his challenges leading up to the final confrontation pose more of a challenge than Fishbowl himself. That's not to say he won't knock the player down a few times, but the numerous challenges of his Mysteriums more than give players the training they need to battle the numerous visions Mysterio has in store. Players will also spend more time battling Mysterio's vision minions than the man himself. Oftentimes, though, just keeping up with Mysterio as he warps around the environment and fires his numerous projectiles will still have players keeping a constant eye on their spider sense. Much like his appearance in 2004 Spider-Man 2, Mysterio has more vision than fight in him. Wraith.
That's beautiful.
Peter's former ally on the police force, Yuri has fully embraced her anti-hero status, reluctantly teaming up with Spider-Man to take down the Cult of the Flame. When Peter gets in her way, she lives up to her namesake by showing Spidey all she's learned in the time since they were partners. Wraith is ridiculously fast and strong for a non-superpowered human, and her chain whip attacks can easily leave Spidey on his back, especially if players haven't spent any time perfecting their parry skills. She'll also routinely disappear into the smoke and strike from the shadows so fast that Peter's Spidey sense barely has enough time to react. Yuri will also take every opportunity to bring the fight up close and personal. Maintaining distance is key, alongside making smart use of all the tech at Peter's fingertips, lest you incur the wrath of the Wraith.
You need to figure out your priorities. Because I'd rather lose sleep over the one person I killed than all the ones I didn't save.
Kraven.
Now you're in for it.
This one was a long time coming, and while the wait was more than worth it, even the symbiote suit isn't going to be enough to save Peter from the Master Hunter. Like many of the boss battles in Spider-Man 2, the fight with Kraven is multiple stages. With each new stage, Kraven changes his tactics, keeping both the player and Spidey guessing what's coming next. And getting up close and personal with Kraven will almost certainly lead to a smackdown. Players will need to play this entire fight as strategically as possible, as Kraven has just as many gadgets and tricks up his sleeve as Peter does. Kraven has numerous unblockable attacks, and can also easily parry many of Spidey's strongest attacks. You technically can't win this fight, but you'll still be fighting for your life until it's over.
But you still hold back. Kill or be killed.
The Lizard.
Hey, Doc. Ready for your annual physical?
The build-up to the final showdown with the Lizard is rivaled only by Kraven himself. Given that Kraven was in search of the ultimate hunt, he might have gone too far mutating the Lizard even further. Now a monstrous version of his former self, the Lizard can not only withstand many of Spidey's strongest attacks, but he has a plethora of unblockable attacks and tail sweeps that can and will leave Spidey vulnerable to a follow-up smash attack. Even with the Lizard's newfound size, he's surprisingly mobile. Not only will Spidey need to heavily rely on his gadgets and symbiote-bolstered attacks, but also environmental traps to score a couple of easy hits on the reptile. The multiple stages increase the difficulty of the encounter each time, as the Lizard mixes his flurry of attacks while seemingly growing in strength each time he gets knocked down. Mr. Negative.
So how many people did you kill before I got here?
I didn't have a choice.
You always have a choice.
One of the main big bads of the 2018 game, the battle with Mr. Negative is far more personal this time around, as Miles faces down the man responsible for his father's death. However, even during his time away at the raft, Lee has learned some new tricks that he's more than willing to share with Miles. Mr. Negative starts the fight with many of the attacks veterans will be familiar with. He'll also unleash numerous follow-up slam attacks, forcing players to maintain a hit-and-run tactic, all while not being afraid to get the odd cheap hit in. The final stretch of the fight can be especially overwhelming, as Lee digs into his old bag of tricks and pulls Miles into a world full of phantom Spidermen for him to battle through, making players stay on the offensive for the remainder of the encounter.
Do it. Please.
Kraven vs. Venom.
At last.
Not long after players are treated to the ultimate power trip as they're given control of Venom himself, Kraven comes looking for a rematch, hoping Venom's true form will offer him his final hunt. Once again, players shouldn't underestimate Kraven just because they've been given access to an even stronger version of the symbiote. Kraven is somehow even faster here, made more obvious by Venom's slower and more lumbering nature. Kraven will continue to make use of his gadgets to keep Venom discombobulated. He prefers a much closer approach to this encounter than in his battle with Peter, shrugging off Venom's attacks with his shield and following up with the barrage of attacks with his spear. Without access to Peter's wealth of gadgets and even his abilities, it can be quite easy to lose this last bout with Kraven.
Thank you.
Symbiote Peter.
It's just me.
As the symbiote takes further hold of Peter, Miles attempts to snap Pete out of the alien's control. However, they won't give it up without a fight, and Peter absolutely does not hold back. Switching from Peter at his most powerful to Miles simply trying to survive the encounter is jarring. Peter has access to symbiote-based attacks the player never got to unleash when they were in control. Peter is erratically fast. Simply keeping up with him to plan your attack can be a challenge, and many of Peter's attacks do massive damage if they connect. Targeting the bell hanging in the arena can give players a reprieve, but it's short-lived as Peter will be quick to web it up. The fight against Peter is not only difficult, it's emotionally charged as Miles pleads with Peter to give up the symbiote, all while Peter unleashes his fury on his young protege.
I know you're hurting, Pete, but you're better than this.
I know, but no.
Scream.
Let her go.
only was this one of the most unexpected fights in the entire game, it's also one of the most difficult. With Mary Jane possessed by the symbiote, Peter fights for his life as MJ as Scream unleashes multiple attacks that no other symbiote has access to. Players will be constantly thrown around the environment by Scream's hair attacks, as well as her namesake, which can leave Peter incapacitated and open to further attack. Making smart use of the environment can give players a slight edge, as can Peter's numerous gadgets. But Scream might not give players the chance to use any of these tricks with her endless barrage of attacks, both physical and emotional. The battle against Scream is one of the longest in the game up to that point, forcing players to endure 4 separate stages, with Scream growing in strength from one to the next. Venom versus the Spider-Man.
Heal the world. Together.
Yo, bro!
Not cool.
The much anticipated battle for the city, Peter and Miles live up to the game's tagline, Stronger Together, as both the Spider-Men attempt to take down the symbiote at its most powerful. Pretty much the only way many players will come out the other side is if all their equipment and abilities have been maxed out. Venom will take Peter and his minions on a trip down memory lane, and Peter is forced to constantly stay on the move with Venom's series of ground pound attacks, as well as covering the entire arena in poisonous ooze. In the remaining stages, seemingly learning all their best moves from his previous encounter with Peter, Venom can almost sense Miles' attacks, blocking his incoming barrages while unleashing his own powerful counters. An absolute gauntlet of a boss encounter, it's going to take everything the player has to finally heal the world. Which Spider-Man 2 boss battle left you asking a friend for help? Let us know in the comments. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.